we will turn our attention to the final game in this year's Six Nations, which will be taking place in Paris between France and Scotland. It's going to be on Friday, March 26th, 9 o'clock kickoff local time, that's 8 o'clock here, in the Stade de France in Paris, as I said. It's going to be refereed by Wayne Barnes.
Darth Barnes from the weekend in the TMO box.
From the TMO box, yes. He was definitely giving me some vibes in that. He was very good in that capacity. He's one of the great refs in the game at the moment, arguably the best.
No fear of him in charge of this one.
No,
great
ref for the final game of this year's tournament. The weather forecast, as it is as we shoot this evening, it's currently suggesting that Friday evening will be a little bit wet in Paris. Some high enough winds, although the weather either side of that system that's supposed to bring that is supposed to be nice. So with a bit of luck, hopefully they dodge that little front.
I'm sure Galthié and co will not be hoping for a wet one, although that might be what they get. But they're obviously going to have to attack this. Yeah, it's the final game of the tournament, as we say, and the winners are yet to be determined.
Yes.
So a long wait to find out this week who is going to be crowned the Six Nations Championship. An anxious wait for Wales. And a chance for France to steal it from them. Of course, they'll be delighted, France, to have recovered that win over the Welsh. It all looked lost. It looked like their campaign had folded in on itself after a promising enough start.
Yeah.
And now they have a chance to go and win it and finally secure a championship.
Yeah, to do so they'll need to win this. Not only win this game, obviously, they'll need to win it by a margin of 21 points or more, and they'll have to do so with a bonus point. Which, to be fair, you'd imagine if you win by over 21 points, you usually have a bonus point. But
7 penalties.
Yeah, no, so seven penalties and a 7 stellar defence will not be enough to get the job done. So they're currently sitting in third in the table at the moment, but a losing bonus of any kind will get them second as well.
Yeah,
not that they want second.
It's not a non-factor,
no.
But they were in a similar scenario now last autumn at the wrapping up of the 2020 championship, where they actually had Ireland, and it was different because Ireland actually had a chance to win the tournament themselves.
They did,
but France had to win. I can't remember the margin, but they had to win by a specific margin with a bonus point. And they were edging the game against Ireland. They were on top.
They were winning the game comfortably,
and had a bit of a lead, and they decided really to kind of play within themselves. They kicked the corners, they ensured themselves the win, they took 3-pointers when they were on offer and just saw off Ireland. In the end it was 8 points because Ireland grabbed a try at the very end to move it from 15 to 8. But there was a period in there where they had Ireland stretched. They kind of had their number offensively against that defence, and they never really attacked the game like you might expect. And looking back on it, they probably didn't have the championship on their mind so much as they wanted to beat Ireland and right the wrong of a couple of years past and right the wrongs of recent defeats to Ireland in all venues.
Yeah.
Which is not a non-factor.
No, they definitely exercised those demons with that performance and the one in this championship. But
this time, is a win alone any good to them?
No. It's not. Well, a win, it's good in the sense that Scotland are good, and a win against Scotland will serve them well enough in terms of saying, we won a game. But no, they want to win trophies, is what they want to win, more so than games. Because this French team have won loads of games.
Yeah, exactly. A win here is their third second-place finish in a row, and in 3 consecutive tournaments they'll have finished second.
Yeah.
Six Nations, Autumn Nations, Six Nations.
Yeah.
Second.
It's not fun. The bridesmaids approach is not fun in world sport, but in rugby especially as well. Like we've been that weary soldier a few times as Irish fans. Watching great teams finish second over and over again is pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
They will be desperate to not do that. So I expect them to try and start this with intent and look to get after a Scotland team with very little to play for themselves. Conversely, there is still stuff at stake in the sense that every place is worth a fair chunk of change to all these Six Nations teams, and the fact that the Six Nations revenue is, well, in Ireland, in the RFU's case, I know it's 70% of their revenue, and it's a similar disproportionate ratioed figure for all of these unions as well. So like the difference between 5th, where Scotland currently are, versus I think 2nd, where they could get to.
They're 4th at the moment.
4th at the moment.
England
sorry.
have 5th.
England have sewn up 5th, nice and tight. But the difference between 4th and 2nd, which is the jump they could make, does represent a fair chunk of change, and as well as a bit of momentum. Couple that with the fact that they haven't actually won in Paris since 1999 I think was the last time they won. So for all kinds of reasons, Scotland will not be rolling over.
No, well, interestingly, from their point of view, they could they could win this game and stay where they are conceivably if they give France a losing bonus point, but if they win it by more than 7 and don't give France the losing bonus, they could leapfrog both France and Ireland. So actually if places on the tournament are to come into to factor into their thinking at all, they might actually have to win this by a margin, which makes it more difficult again. But I think from their point of view, it is less about that.
I think more so for Scotland, a win's a win if they can get one.
Yeah, because it's just been rough. That follow up to the England win will have hurt them, because to lose the heartbreaking game where they played really well against Wales, and then to again not show up at the door against Ireland and get blown away, and granted they hustled back and it was a 3-point game in the end, but they were nowhere in that game as up front where they had been so strong. So that's like they're definitely hurting at the moment, and another historic away win to cap off the tournament would definitely end it in a better light for them. But factoring in both of those thoughts, I think we're in for a ripper of a game.
I think so too.
If Aldred is to be believed, he was speaking to French media and he was saying, we're about winning the championship. We want to win the championship.
Tournament, which means 21 points, which means bonus points, which means nothing short of that, which means watch out, Scotland. France are coming for you.
It might mean that. Yeah, it's definitely it could be an absolute banger of a Friday evening. We've had a few, and these two have both been involved in one. France in a couple against England and Wales, and Scotland had that game against Wales, which was absolutely stellar.
Yes,
they obviously beat England as well, and they'll fancy it. They fancy themselves in all kinds of contexts, and they have a good squad. They can put out a team and put together a performance here. So I think both teams will rock up to Paris hungry, and I think both teams will rock up with the intent to attack as well,
and then we'll see the better of them, which just spells good rugby for us. If the rest of the tournament's anything to go by, when two motivated and capable sides such as these turn up, you get a cracking game, and that's what we're hoping for.
Indeed. Just to touch on the squads, obviously as we shoot this on Tuesday, we do not have the squads, but we do have some updates. Some of which are more encouraging than others. I think we have to start with Scotland, because the COVID postponement of this game has reared its ugly head in the sense that they actually have it's hard to know exactly what the situation is. I think there's been sort of mixed reports, but they've named a squad and they've dropped 9 players from the squad, and 7 of the 9 have been from English clubs. Maitland, who has been lighting it up,
he was at fullback,
has to return to Saracens this week
to play
championship
footy
against Richmond when he's fighting for a Lions place.
It's pretty
really
dismal.
Really terrible to see that, and it's done now. They've named their squad, so it's just it's exactly what they hoped and we all hoped wouldn't happen. It's understand that there's agreement between them and the PRL that allowed, so I think a limited number of England players for the match, and Townsend obviously feels that he has enough back 3 cover.
Well, he can field even without Maitland. He can have Hoggy return to fullback, and then you have Graham and Doohan on either wing, and that is a world class back 3. So I understand if you're kind of having to pick. It is a Sophie's choice, but of all of them, Maitland was the one who's unlucky now to miss out. And as you say, now he's in as a massive step down, where he's meant to be a Friday night Six Nations game, and now he's going to be somewhere in the Championship.
Gacken won't be watching, and he'll have to hope he's done enough, because he's played really well this year. But, he could have used a big performance in Paris to push him onto the play, and he might miss out now, and he might feel, certainly you'd be thinking twice about Saracens and your commitment to them, staying with them as they get relegated, and now here you are having to play for them. Very, very disappointing for him. And Jamie Batty, the backup loose-headed they've been using the last couple of weeks, comes out. That's a frustration, but obviously I personally prefer Ollie Kebbell as a backup loose-head, so I'm not too worried about that. Johnny Gray has dropped out from injury. Obviously still no Scott Cummings back. Other English-based players to drop out: Ewan Ashman, the backup hooker; Cornell Duprea, who hasn't featured much in the back row but is a good player, and then obviously James Lang gone, Duncan Taylor gone.
2 centres there, mind you. They haven't really been using them. They did have Lang in there earlier, but the 2 centres they had last time, the 2 Glaswegian boys, will probably be the ones to don the shirts this week. It's annoying. It's always vexing when you see the club game meddling in the international game, and it's just an unfortunate headache for Townsend to have to deal with on match week in the Six Nations. I feel sick for them. I don't think it's right. They didn't do anything wrong, and they're in a terrible position, and they haven't. It should have been ensured that they would have had their full squad available. But
they haven't lost any key starters, and they do have a ripping good starting 15 that they can pick.
And
so they've got
Finn Russell back in the mix as
yes,
well.
Yes, he's in the squad.
Good news.
He's in the squad.
News, everyone.
Yes. Very good news. I mean, I think they do need Finn. I mean, if we see Finn's out of the team, it's going to be a very different dynamic altogether.
It's much easier to weather those horrendous kind of personnel losses due to that when you actually do have your star 10 available to start.
Indeed, and they have Sutherland. So like they'll go with Sutherland at loosehead. They have a choice between Dave Cherry and George Turner. They have a choice.
Whichever one they pick, they just hope they grab a brace again because they've both been at it.
Yes, indeed, and not having the kind of performance that Turner had against Ireland.
No.
They have a choice at tight head. Xander and Nell, both fine options. Personally, I'd go for Nell just because Xander keeps giving away penalties on the first couple of scrums.
Yeah, taking
himself a very long time to warm up to games is Xander.
Yes, it's true.
They'll probably go with their light in a lock. They'll go with Skinner and Gilchrist, probably same as. They got Ritchie, Watson and Fagerson, not going to be disrupted. Probably Ali Price will come back in for Scott Steele at 9. Finn Russell hopefully back at 10. I think Sam Johnson now with Lang out of the picture has the 12 jersey, and then you're looking at probably Hugh Jones over Chris Harris.
Yeah, well, I think it should be Hugh Jones over, but it's a tactical thing. It remains to be seen what they do. They might go with Harris, and it might be a mistake.
No, I think Harris is the kind of guy you might go for if you were fearing like the English power game.
Yeah.
But Hugh Jones is going to be more up to speed with and adept at and comfortable with the speed of a game in Paris against this French team.
The fear I would have is them thinking, Vakatawa versus Hugh Jones is not a good matchup for Hugh Jones, so maybe chuck in Harris to be solid. And I think it's wrong-headed because Finn needs a guy like Hugh Jones. I mean, Finn, to be honest, needs this centre pairing. He hasn't had to play with them yet. It hasn't quite clicked with Finn when you've had Lang, Harris and other kind of more rudimentary centres in there. They need guys with spark to play off them. Yeah. So like some of those skip passes out to 13, a guy like Hugh Jones in the form that he's in could turn those half breaks that had been materialising from them when Harris gets on the ball. It kind of amounts to a little hustling carry for a few metres and then they go again. Hugh Jones could turn that into a single phase try as we've seen before, and likewise Johnson has done so for them before. So I think there's potential for some sparks in the midfield if they pick that the one that they should.
Yeah, I agree. I think they should be going to meet offense with some offense.
They should.
The back three they'll go with will be Doohan, Darcy and Hogg, barring injury, as we say. Exactly right. And then so they do have more or less their full team, and they do have more than enough to be confident going into this one, given the good performances they've registered in parts in recent times.
Good performances, annoying results.
A little bit,
as is often the way.
Indeed.
But from France's point of view, then there are also injury concerns heading into this one. I think Mathieu Jalibert, he's been ruled out. He obviously came off injured last week as well, and he's been replaced in the squad by Carbonell, who's no stranger to the squad and the system. He's also been in there. He was in there for the start of this campaign when Ntamack wasn't available. So
the Autumn Nations Cup
and the Autumn Nations Cup as well. So they are blessed in terms of who they can bring in, but it's no good because Jalibert had been brilliant for them. Then Pau's second row, Baptiste Pacenti has been called up to the squad following the injury of Taufi Fanua and the suspension of Willemse. They'll be desperately hoping to see Bernard Leroux back, because we were saying even last week that it's been no fun for them at lock. Taufi Fanua is such a find, and he was in such good form, and he grabbed that try so well, and then he got injured. And Willemse had been a little bit looser in the tournament, but he's still a hefty lock, and to have him not available now through obviously a deserved ban for his actions last week, but they'll be a little lighter than they had been in this particular one. It'll be interesting how this affects set piece.
Both sides pretty light at second row when you consider what they started with. I think the starting 15 that they'll go with, or 23 that they'll go with, will be largely similar. I don't think that you're looking to mix up too much, although they do have the short 6-day turnaround versus the 14. I know it's a short turnaround for Scotland as well, but they were playing Italy, so they weren't playing a full test match. So it is different in that regard. But I suspect Ntamack will come in for Jalibert. They'll probably stick with Fiku and Vakatawa and Penaud, Thomas and Dulin. Although there is a case for Arthur Vincent.
There is. No, I think they'll probably stick with Vakatawa for this one, to be honest. It depends what the Scots do, I imagine.
There's also a case for shifting Fiku to a wing.
There is, but I don't think you want to get rid of Penaud or Thomas at the moment either.
Vincent's been very good. Defensively, they were kind of missing that.
They were. I'm not sure if they'll think the threat is the same from Scotland, although it could be with Finn. But I think they'll be trying to. Similarly, I think they'll be picking with an offensive mindset rather than a defensive one, and that will probably lead to Vakatawa. But to be honest, they're good options.
Yeah.
All of them. I wouldn't be worried about whatever centre combination they put out, because I actually think all three of those options are great players. You can only pick two of them.
Agreed. And they'll probably go with the similar pack, although you're looking at Swan Ravage from Toulon and maybe Pasanti on the bench, but maybe him in if Bernard Leroux isn't right.
Yeah.
So that's definitely lighter. But,
yes, it is.
Yeah, it remains to be seen, I guess, how fit Leroux is, but they do still have the bulk of their classy first choice team.
They do,
more than enough they'll feel to give it a right go.
They do, and then some impact on the bench, which they'll have to trust as well. We saw Serran, Carbonell will probably be on the bench. You have guys Vincent or Rattez, depending on what they want to do with the 23 jersey. Good options. Antonio back in, Baptiste Gros, Camille Chat off the bench is such an asset that no other team really
we haven't seen the best of Chat.
No, we haven't yet. He hasn't. He was coming back from injury at the start of the campaign, which is where Marchand was just steadfast in there. But he's a super. I love his performances off the bench more so even when he starts, because he's so dynamic in the final quarter. But yeah, an embarrassment of riches, as is always the case for France, and it remains to be seen what they'll pick. We kind of know a very settled side, which has been unsettled for the lack of their regular 10, Jalibert, and their second rows, which are a bit well
battered and bruised
as it is. It is the
and
engine room.
Eye gougey.
Well,
in the case of Phillips,
battered, bruised, and banned.
Yes. I guess without any more on the squads, we're going to look ahead to the game and just look at sort of the winning conditions and the picture that both sides are trying to paint. And we'll start with France, the hosts. The hostess with the mostest on the line, certainly.
Yes, indeed. A championship to fight for. They know the equation, but how do they actually put into effect their game plan and try and run over the Scots, which is what they need to do?
Yeah, it starts, as all good French things do, with maintaining that clinical offense that has got them to this position. That's going to need to be as sharp as ever. I think in the absence of Jalibert, Dupont's role takes on even greater significance. He's very much the driver of that offensive tempo. He's very much the leader of it.
Yeah, Le Petit General, as is tradition over there. He fits that bill entirely, and they do play a lot off 9 when they're in their pomp and
indeed,
in momentum.
More than any other team in the comp, they play off 9, and they do so with speed and with good deception and hard line running as well as the key to what they do, and then linking up with one another obviously as well. But it's on Dupont to keep sort of testing the Scottish defence, probing for weak points, putting carries in space, recycling the ball super quickly and moving it on, and just jacking up the tempo on a Scottish defence that could be flat-footed in the face of it.
Indeed. And then the other link, well, we saw that Entmac, who'll likely start, was maybe a little shy of minutes, not quite his in-form self. Certainly wasn't taking the jersey off Jalibert with his showing last week. No. Not at all. But to be honest, when they're at their best, the 10 can kind of be a little bit of a passenger and just a conduit for it, and just get through his hands and out wider.
Because Fiku can come in at first receiver.
Exactly. If you're going with Fiku or Vakatawa, these guys who are playmakers at centre, it really is just the job of the 10 to be the link man between the 9 who's kind of driving that tempo and those outside men who are then going to make key decisions in terms of getting the really dangerous outside finishers on the ball. So yeah, being timely with that, a lot is on the shoulders of Gael Fiku, as it has been all tournament. He's been one of, if not their player of the tournament. He's been absolutely stellar on the other side of the ball. Yeah, I can't think
of, even Dupont hasn't been perfect.
No, he hasn't.
Fiku hasn't put a foot wrong. I think he has been kind of perfect.
I haven't seen him make any errors. I think he's been pretty technically perfect in anything he's done.
He got caught once last week by Navidi. He was picking the ball off the base of a rock, and Navidi kind of slapped the ball. That was the only error. I remember noting it.
It's just a good play from Navidi as well.
It hasn't. He's been everywhere. He's been absolutely brilliant, and right up to getting around the corner and making that classy clutch play on the game-winning try last week. He's definitely been a guy they lean on. But yeah, I think tactically speaking, you're looking at sitting down that Scottish midfield, whoever they go for. They've had issues at 13 defensively,
they have,
and really off first phase attacking that midfield and sitting them down and getting it away from the Scottish pack and forcing them around the corner, then working the wide channels from there. And really, once they break the line, getting ahead of steam up, like almost England-esque kind of way. You want just Vakatawa without much deception, battering down at the 13 channel and forcing them to tackle him.
If it's Hugh Jones opposite him, you should be making Hugh Jones have a defensive game rather than an offensive game, because he's dangerous when he's in attacking mode, and he can be a little suspect when he's in defensive mode. And they have with whatever, if it's Vanslant, if it's Vakatawa, if it's Fiku, they are all hefty guys and dynamic guys in the contact. So they'll whichever one is in whichever shirt, they can all run that hard line to sit down those midfielders, and they can all get their hands free and get the ball away as well. Like, if the French equation doesn't change that much, they will still want to keep the speed high. They'll want to avoid rucks if they can. You bypass
like they did against England,
much like the same, because one of the Scotland attributes, one of their great weapons is guys like Hamish Watson, who are going to be available out in the wide channels, who are going to be hunting steals when they're on defensive mode. And the easiest way to avoid the steal is to just not have the ruck.
Exactly,
get the ball out of there.
The pack matchup isn't as good as France might like it.
No, especially without their locks.
So I think definitely making the game about width and doing that offset piece.
Also when the equation is to win by 21 points, you want a high tempo kind of wide
You want to
game.
look for tries, and you want to look for them offset piece, because Scotland, they've been caught in a couple of games. They were caught by Wales offset piece, just in both the wide channels, and I think last year France cut them open a couple of times offset piece with their inside balls, blindside wingers picking lines, as Wales did to them last week. And also just the danger that they have everywhere. Like, all they really need with their quality support running is an edge on a contact sometimes, and then someone picking a good line, and then all of a sudden everyone's focused in, the line breaks there, we're all picking support lines, we're going to link up and find a try. And that's really the hope that they're trying to bring. But I definitely think focusing not on multi-phase, although last week was kind of the return of the multi-phase tries in some sense. I think focusing on trying to strike off first phase ball. I think they will do this as well.
I think so too. They have the tools to do it, and like ultimately their pretty picture is sitting down and folding the Scottish midfield, occupying their dangerous back row and hustling second rows with kind of deception and stuff, having them committed at the wrong places, have their hands where they shouldn't be and where the ball isn't, and ultimately in the hands of Teddy Thomas or Pinot for a nice try. Dotting down in the corner is the perfect picture for France.
A healthy mixture of first phase strike plays and third phase power plays, where you're sitting them down and getting around the corner, and then finding room for guys like Thomas and Pinot to just go to work. And Dulin as well. The
matchup when they have the ball in hand, the whole French backline will get the better of their opposite man for the most part. Even if it's a one-on-one with a few bits of space either side, the French will usually do pretty well in that scenario. So it's just trying to fashion those clever plays.
And as good as the Scottish D can be, no side has really managed to contain this French offense. If given enough opportunities in the right areas of the field, they'll back themselves to rack up the points to score. The question for France is, in the other areas of the game that aren't about the offense, how are they stacking up, and are they going to be able to give themselves a platform to have enough offensive opportunities to put enough points on the scoreboard to win the game by the margin they need to win it at?
It's a tough battle, because it comes to, as you were alluding to, the forward battle, where it's very, very interesting, where if you're missing high caliber locks of the likes of Willemse and Taufi Fanua, you're admittedly going to be a bit shorn of heft in both scrum. You're going to be shorn of a bit of experience at line out. That being said, Olivon's the one who seems to lead that line out, and the back row do a lot of jumpers, so they might be able to make do there. But then the other thing is the kicking game that kind of marries with the set piece. They need to kick better. We were alluding to it in our review segment. We've been mentioning it all tournament. Their game management and control is what lets them down a little bit. It's not uncommon for them to start like a house on fire, to start roaring in with a couple of scores, and then suddenly kind of drift in and out of games, and lose territory battles for prolonged periods against teams that are kind of kicking more probing and more accurately. And then all it takes is a couple of things, like maybe a couple of scrums going against them, and then suddenly they can really pile pressure on themselves and not really know how to respond.
Exactly right. And I think that the foundation that the way that Ireland managed to deal with Scotland have a very tough scrum and a very good line out, and Ireland took that away from them, and Scotland didn't cope.
No.
And I definitely think, looking at Cyril Bay getting a good edge on Thomas Francis last week, but then equally looking at Cian Healy doing a number on Mohamed Ouas, it's hard to know where this French scrum is,
especially without two locks now.
Without two locks. So just if they could take locking down the scrum, I think they'd take that with Sutherland on the other end, and I really do think Nell should come in for Scotland. But if they go with Xander, there is scope for Bay, I think, I think
there's at least one penalty.
There's at least one penalty they're you're going to get from it exactly right. But the area that Ireland really did a number on Scotland was the line out, stealing 6, and they were very confident coming into that game. But I think there are learnings from a French point of view to be taken from that
what's
game.
Encouraging is the change in terms of how they finished the game last week, with trusting their bench to get the job done, even in a tight contest, shows that they are switched on to learning, because it was a direct lesson from the week before that was applied successfully. So that's good evidence 1 week at a time that this is still a young French side and they're still learning and there's still all kinds of room for improvement. And to be this good and this young and still have things to improve on, and still have a game like this where you're playing for a championship, it's a great scenario to be in. But it'll take some nous, some wiliness. They need to put in a performance not dissimilar to what the Irish pack were up to last week against England, where if you can try and game the ref, if you can, like if the Scots are at fiddly sticks at the scrum or anything, Barnes is the kind of guy who will pin you for that. If the French can aggravate them and incite that kind of thing out of them, good. That's just good play.
And if they can disrupt the line out, I mean, we saw the lack of confidence that was generated in Scotland from a couple of line-out steals. It really did spiral out of control for them. They were like throwing tamely to 2 and then overthrowing, and just they just seemed to lose it mentally. And I definitely think with playmakers like Olivon in there and Aldred contesting the line-out and attacking the Scots there could be the winning of the game. But as you alluded to, the biggest mismatch in terms of that favours Scotland in this game, without question, is the kicking game, where Scotland have arguably been the best kicking team in the competition. They
took England to school in week 1.
And even Wales, they dominated the kicking game in that game, and Wales obviously won the territory game against France, but Scotland completely did them in that area of the game. Unquestionably, they kicked the ball between Hogg and Russell, just found seams, long deep spirals, just putting the ball like they manipulate the space very well and then go for depth. So they go long grass finders and force you to exit from there. It's a very different proposition from the little box kicks that Wales were knocking to the back 3 at the start of the game, from which they could counter attack. They're going to have to find a way to get up the field without because Scotland are going to heave it deep. They're not going to be able to counter attack realistically from their own 22, so they're going to have to improve the kicking game and get up the field. And penalty generators are good if they can work around their lack of exits, if they win the forward battle and generate penalties in the midfield and get down that way. But if it doesn't go that way and it's all sort of even enough up front and Scotland are pegging them down in their territory, there's scope for them not to really get an offensive set for 20 straight minutes.
This is true. It'll be a tough job for likely Doolan with Entmac probably covering that backfield as well.
But just the quality of the kicking, the individual kicking, like Dupont is taking box kicks and getting them half charged and kind of just catching them weird where they're just like low drillers into touch.
Some of Pinot's exit kicking not great, and Toma not a particularly good. Like neither of the wingers, as prolific as they are as try scorers, they're not really kicking wingers, which puts a lot of pressure on your 15, which isn't Boutier. As we've said, they have missed Boutier a lot. He's a bit more
as good as Doolan is.
As good as Doolan is, and Doolan is a bit more of a typical French flair kind of outside back that you'd associate with, and I can understand people going like, no, in the truth, but like Boutier doesn't need to be in there, but like Doolan scored that winning try, he's beautiful on the ball, but they need to be able to exit, and one thing Boutier did bring them was just a pumping punt that could go the length of the field, and they are missing that. They definitely are. Maybe a bit more from Doolan, maybe a bit from Entmac. We've seen Entmac in that fullback role, certainly against Ireland in that game in Paris last year in the end of the Six Nations, scoring a beautiful counter attack off kick return as well. There's definitely scope for that. Like even if you like your kicking game if you're in a kick tennis thing, you don't have to kick out. If you can find a seam and find a counter attack, that's very much in keeping with this French team's kind of ethos in terms of how to play the game. So looking for opportunities with counter attacks when Scotland are kicking deep, but also as you say, just general improvement across the board in the kicking, and that goes for Dupont, it goes for Entmac, who's now in the 10 shirt, and it goes for Doolan as well. Those are the three guys with the main responsibility.
The other thing that they were doing is kicking it straight to Liam Williams downfield. Like they were trying, it felt like they were trying to get the extra length off their kicks and just weren't, and as a result Liam Williams was getting like prime counter-attacking ball from which he was making he made a couple of breaks, but he also had a couple of bombs that recovered, and to be honest, the equation's the same. Stuart Hogg's brilliant,
one of the best counter-attacking transitionary fullbacks that you'll ever see. Like what he's not good at, if he can find a way to get it over his head such that he's facing his own try line tracking back, then he's a bit more dodge. But if you kick
like an
it
attacking kick,
yeah,
it's
but
a different thing.
Indeed, but if you kick it to him and he's running onto it at pace, and he has Van der Merwe on one side and Graham on the other, that can be a recipe for disaster.
So I think long touch finders and then try and disrupt the line out is how France will look to get out of their territory. Obviously quality of the kick is important, but find touch, try and disrupt the line out and not give Finn clean ball and disrupt their, come up defensively. Obviously they're going to have to deal with that Scottish offence.
They will.
But getting in their faces, trying to stop things at source primarily, and then generate turnovers and penalties.
If you can mess up their pack and their go forward that way, that's where the Edwards defence does start in general, is just with contact. Good aggressive line speed, good hustle off the ball, which embodied by no one better than Fiku in terms of his scramble D throughout this whole tournament. But they're all scrambling really well. But you don't want to be in scramble mode too often against Finn, because Finn's going to pick, in terms of identifying the space in a fractured fractured line, he's created it. So it's much easier to just make the ruck messy by dominating the collision, and then it's a bit more scruffy when it gets to Finn, and it's the Scottish line that's not set, not the French one. That's the picture for them.
They didn't bring pressure really either of the last 2 weeks. It's been much more about scramble than it has been about out and out pressure. And the Wales kind of showed it up a little last week when Ntamak and Jalibert were both drifting off following the Bigger, who was a 10, and they just hit the blindside winger. And then on another example, they were listing across field, and Jonathan Davis just cuts a line and ends up chunking off about 20 metres. Scotland, Finn Russell is a magnificent reader of defences, and if the French tactic is going to be to sort of
stand off and drift off,
drift wide and shut down the outside, make sure they don't get outside you, that gives Finn a bit of time on the ball, and it allows him to sort of pick the right pass to someone like Sam Johnson cutting a short line, sitting down the French defence, and then all of a sudden they might be able to get quick ball, might be able to get their wingers in a bit of space, or just like a favourable carry for the likes of Hamish Watson. Then France are under a bit of pressure. I think generally speaking, you want to be putting pressure on Russell. You want to be blitzing a little more. You want to be getting into his face, forcing him to maybe throw in one of those grubbers that doesn't work. Forcing him to take contact or take it away.
Role. Is it Aldrit might be the paciest back row they have? He's normally a good game man for a job.
They don't usually do it like player by player. One of the guys who's been leading their defence is Marchand. He's been the guy who's been flying out of the line. But they do definitely need to put someone in Russell's face.
They do.
And then obviously Vakatawa knows how Russell likes to manipulate 13s.
That is a great dynamic. If they go with Vakatawa, which I'd imagine they will, that's a great dynamic. Finn, maybe he fails to concentrate for a moment and throws a pass to Vakatawa by force of habit.
The wrong man. No, surely not.
No, hopefully not. Well, that'll be a good picture for them. That would involve a bit more of a shoot that we haven't seen yet from them. I'd imagine the shoot will come on the inside if at all, and that'll just be to pressure the pass of Finn, and then beyond that it'll be a little push and drift like they've been doing pretty well, because the thing that allows it is that they're all pacey, their whole pack is pacey, and now even without their two hefty locks there's a chance their pack might be pacier than it has been. So they have the speed to, even when they're a little bit fractured, recover, and that's where they've been so adhesive and sticky and kind of awkward to unpick for every team that have come across them, apart from Wales in the first 20 minutes, to be honest. But most teams have struggled to break them down, and I'd imagine Scotland
clutch plays in their own 22 as well. Like Scotland can get so sloppy on the clean out, especially if the pace of the game is high. Like if they can find a way to scramble and not turn line breaks into tries, and then all of a sudden the ball is slower and messier, guys like Aldrit and Olivon are going to be getting on that ball trying to turn it over, and then you can catch them on a poor clean out or something like that, and if you can make them the less clinical team, the rest of the game won't matter as much, because when you do get your chances you're going to be clinical, and then that's how you get away from them. But I definitely think 21 point win in the offing, they're going to need to manage their way through the game much better than they usually do, because if they give themselves the same number of limited opportunities that they usually do in a game, it probably won't be enough.
No, they'll find it hard to put that kind of score on Scotland unless they put together a pretty close to perfect performance for this team that we've seen so far.
Agreed.
From Scotland's point of view then, it's a different equation obviously, but we saw in the Ireland game
The
Ireland-France game, even some successes pretty early in terms of the kicking game, just with a nice pressure kicking game, generated a lot of early territory and possession in the red zone, which they also did against Wales, but then they got counterpunched towards the end. That was kind of what we saw from Scotland as well, winning a lot of the small marginal battles and then not quite winning the game in those two ones that got away from them. So they obviously have work-ons to do in terms of just their own game management, their own clinicality really is what's been costing them. They've been dominating games in some areas and then not reflecting that on the scoreboard, particularly against Wales, I'm thinking in terms of that. And it's going to be a similar equation because it's an attacking side. It's a side looking to attack you. Like if they can start like they did against Wales and then hold on and not give away key scores at either side of half time, they could be in with a great shout.
Yeah, from an offensive point of view, I definitely think leaning on the territory game is definitely going to be important for Scotland.
It's a key difference. It's the thing that they have over them. In terms of on paper, they're probably better than France at it.
Scotland have started games in the right areas of the field, and France haven't by and large, apart from that early one. So edging that territory game, we saw Ireland and Wales put up bombs, get on the top of Doolan, win some one-on-one matchups in the air. You feel like Hogg is primed to Hogg and Russell between them are primed to put in a great kicking showing and generate some good territory. And then from there the question becomes, how best to break down this Edwards defence. Obviously, the best chance that you're going to get is from midfield set pieces, and Scotland have been great at like once they get a line break, maintaining the sort of urgency required to find a score from that. I think back to Finn Russell's little play to Johnny Gray that generates the line break, and then Ali Price puts in the little kick for Darcy Graham,
rather than slowing it down and going through 20 phases, which is not going to work against Sean Edwards D more than likely.
Exactly, turning those line breaks and those little hustle plays into quick tries, trying to find where the space is and relying on Finn to put them there. Converting the early territory into points is the only chance they're going to have at winning this game. If they can get on top in the territory game, they're going to have to make that count on the scoreboard. And it's an open question as to whether or not they should take threes or just back their kicking game to get them out of touch. But certainly the picture that Scotland don't want is when they start the game really well, put themselves in the right areas of the field, the French defence manages to make a couple of stands, and then they go up the other end of the pitch and score. That's the kind of backbreaking picture that Scotland could play out that way, and Scotland need to be mindful of that. And I definitely think their own red zone clinicality and how they manage to try and open up the Edwards defence, it's going to require a lot of urgency, and I'm curious to see a bit of
clever as well. Like, we've seen great strike moves from them. We saw Russell open up the Welsh from the midfield with a lovely offload as well. So they definitely know they're capable of striking from that middle third and doing some damage. If they can kind of manipulate the numbers and manipulate the space such that you get an isolated Pinot or an isolated Thomas on either side, those are kind of more suspect defenders. And Scotland have pretty high caliber wingers and a back three that are capable of taking those scores. And if they go with the two Glasgow boys in centre, a pacey backline overall that should be capable of running them around and trying to play a really good kind of gung-ho attacking performance. So the question about threes, I don't know. I think it'll be a mixture of both. I think they will, if they manage to find themselves up in the red zone and a cheap penalty goes their way in the opening off, and yes, I'd imagine they'll chip that over for three. Now, mainly because striking from the red zone is not what it once was. Even I'd sooner see them try and open them up from, as you say, a middle third line out. But once they're there knocking at the door, they want to get some scoreboard pressure as conversion for the thing, because they'll be aware of every 3 points they register, that will have an effect on the French, because the French are chasing a 21 point lead. So if you can build a lead of 3-6-9, that's going to maybe coach the French, or to kind of encourage them to be a bit flamboyant or a bit risky, and then you can capitalise, because we've seen Finn Russell shoot out of line and out of system and make good reads and good picks for intercepts. We've seen them kind of capitalise on loose teams in terms of the kind of, if it's an open frenetic game, you've seen Scotland capitalise in that. It's a question mark in terms of, can they do it? Can they apply that kind of pressure to throw France out of their rhythm?
Indeed. I could see them from if you're looking at a way that this game works out for Scotland, like early doors, exiting with the long deep spirals, just winning the aerial battle by kicking literally farther than the French guys can kick.
Yeah.
Then ending up pinning them back with some smart, like they do manipulate the line really well. They've two guys who can put in clutch kicks. You can move the ball around, work that pendulum of the French back three, which is dodgy at the best of times. Kick it over them, find grass, set up a midfield set piece, try to strike from there, and then you've loads of different options with that French defence. They do tend to drift. If that's the picture that Russell's painted, just hitting the inside man on a screenplay, often Sam Johnson with that trademark no look pass that he'll give,
be very effective.
Just trying to cut through the middle of them, do that 2 or 3 times, and then try and make the killer play on the outside when someone's flat-footed. Getting that rhythm going, and then listen, if it doesn't work out and they find themselves stagnant, probing, seeing if there's anything in the backfield, maybe trying little dinks in behind. There's no harm in forcing France to exit again, and then setting up another midfield.
Even if there's nothing else in an offensive set, just dropping a bomb on Teddy Thomas, you could do far worse. If it means if the attack has stalled in the middle third and 2 or 3 phases more, you're going to get turned over or something. Just huff it up in the air, Sexton style. Isolate those wingers who aren't particularly great in the air. They are fantastic when they're put in a yard of space, but not particularly stellar under the high ball, especially if they're under pressure. So they need to be a bit smart, kind of wily in terms of how they play this game. They want to try and slow it down. They know that France are going to try and want it wild and fast and loads of tries, so they need to be a classic Scotland, annoying, very annoying. And guys like Hamish Watson making rooks that should be 2 seconds, 4 seconds, making a contact last far longer, targeting the ball, and then similarly when you get things like, if you do manage to dislodge a ball to get those scrums, I think Scotland will scrummage aggressively. I think they will look to try and make the set piece a dominant one for themselves. They were, as you said, that was removed from them in the Ireland game in somewhat of an emasculating fashion, really, because they are a team that have built themselves up on that their pack and their set piece, and once that was removed from them, the wheels came off very quickly.
Mohamed Houas is in typical tight head fashion. He will get angry if things aren't going his way and start giving away penalties. And Xander's no different on the Scottish side. But edging that scrum battle could put pressure on France, and just giving France a picture of our attack isn't working, your defence is hustling, fine, you guys can exit, or we'll try a play where it might work, or we either get a try or you have to exit again, and then spending loads of the game with that being the dynamic and really putting it on the French to actually execute an exit, minding your discipline, giving them no easy outs, holding the ball but then kicking it again, finding the corners, force France to exit, and then maybe they try and run it out or do something silly, knock it on, then you set up a scrum, get a penalty. You could even Georgia style take the corner and just keep it down there.
I think they should be good looking to do things like that. I think the perfect picture for them is that slightly slower game where scrums are being reset 3 times and then becoming a Scottish free kick or penalty, and that's going to frustrate France. And if they can just stay within a score for the majority of the game, if they can do so for the first half, and then even if it gets to 60 minutes and it's a score, if it gets to 60 minutes and Scotland just take the lead, that will rattle the French. The French will likely be the first ones to blink and do something crazy in that scenario, because they have to, because they're going for the championship. So if you can then manufacture that scenario and capitalise on it, then there's the winning of the game for you. And then as far as their winning margin, what is it, 7 points they need to win by to secure second. That becomes eminently doable when you play the game that way. If you're just a score ahead,
if you're winning it anyway,
if you're winning it just and France are being wild and loose, then you get the intercept try, and then you take it all away. So they need to be patient, and they need to be kind of physical and deliberately slower.
What they can't have is a similar showing to what they did against Ireland, where the pack didn't show up. Like Ritchie and Matt Fagerson in the back row
do their vanishing man act.
They have to be out there making, because they're going to be up against Ollie Vaughan and Aldred, and these guys who are wonderful playmakers on the French side.
And very game this year. They look very, very motivated.
But they're not matchups that Scotland should fear or hate, but they're matchups that Scotland should be aware of and should be attacking. And if they can edge the physical battle, they're always going to be in with a shout, as they did against England. They have a big performance in them. Obviously, no Cummings, no Gray. The stand-ins are going to have to do well. Sam Skinner,
the line-out will have to try and purr in their absence.
Yeah, and they're going to have to carry well and tackle well as well. The main things for those locks, you're going to have to do the dirty work that Johnny Gray was doing if they are going to have a chance. But they'll certainly feel like their pack can stand up to this French
100%,
pack
and maybe get an edge, especially at scrum with weapons like either Fagerson or Nell, but Sutherland on one side as well. Sutherland v Huas is a matchup that should favour Scotland.
If they do end up with Leroux and Swan Rabaj in that lock, they're both loose head locks by trade.
There you go. So the scrum could suffer a little
on the tight head side, where Sutherland likes to go to work against Huas.
Yeah, so that's on paper it's a good battle, considering how aggressively they like to scrummage anyway against any team. It should be a good on paper matchup for them. That being said, on defense it's a little bit less of a good matchup on paper. It's never a good matchup on paper when you're in Paris trying to defend the French. The main thing is don't give them the ball. That's the easiest way to defend France, is just don't defend France. Just hold the ball, goddamn.
Keep the ball downfield, and then control the midfield battle and make France feed off scraps. And then when they are feeding off scraps, obviously it is a tough matchup, but it's about, as you say, slowing the ball, keeping the pace down, making things dirty for Dupont, and that's where the back row, Ritchie and Watson, need to be sharp and need to force France to really work to clean them out. That's a massive battle is how quick France can generate their ball, because it gets very, very difficult to defend if the ball is quick.
If possession and things are even close to 50-50, then France probably win the game, just on the balance of their attack being that more clinical than Scotland's. But when France do have the ball, there are things that Scotland can be looking to try and do. Slowing down ruck speed for them is a key thing, and they have the tools to do it. Ritchie, Hamish Watson, all these guys who can make rucks last a few extra seconds and annoy Dupont by having them do so, and that's always a good key. Pressuring Fiku, who has very often been in that key distributor role, be it second or third distributor on the move. It's going to be a tough job for either Hugh Jones or whoever is in the 13 channel. Hugh Jones, he's defensively slight in terms of he's not the physical specimen that someone like Vakatawa in the opposite jersey will be. But what he does have is speed, and in Sam Johnson and him, that's a pacey kind of thing. So if he can make good reads, he can get himself even into passing lanes and just disrupt by being in the way. And that's a good kind of thing to present to this French team, because they might be inclined to panic.
It has to be better off set piece. That's where they've been opened up by France before, and that's where Russell and Jones as the two leaders are going to have to, because Russell has to keep an eye on the blindside wing and make sure his flankers are with him, and Ntamak isn't a threat. And especially if you've Ali Price running around out the back, you don't really need to commit to Ntamak. You need to commit to the two centres and the out the back pass. And Hugh Jones' job is going to be shutting down the outside. If Vakatawa is running a line to sit him down, it's on Sam Johnson to get across and make sure that line isn't hit. It's a properly tough dynamic, but with a bit of line speed and then just good reading of the game and adjustments on the fly from Russell,
as good tackles. Then the last part of very often we see Scotland do nearly that whole equation and then not quite stick the tackle, which makes it move entirely.
It's a lot easier to stick the tackles when you're coming up at speed. If you're the guy with the momentum on the collision just changes, flips 100%. If you're sitting flat-footed and Vakatawa's coming at you,
and Vakatawa's either steamrolling you or getting the ball away, or either way it's not good.
Coming out of the line and pressuring the French defence is their best bet, and then playmaking once they break the line. Like if you can get a couple of clutch steals, if you can,
that's just momentum sapping steals. That'll be huge. They'll be as big as tries for Scotland in the context of this game when France are chasing from minute one. They will be. So every little turnover, every little scrappy breakdown, every little drop ball on a France offensive set all feeds the Scottish momentum.
They'll all kill the French as well. The French want to be clinical. They want to turn every entrance to the red zone into points, and if Scotland can stop them from doing that, and a couple of big ones, it could be enough to knock them off kilter and have them forcing the game, which could be where Scotland go to work.
Yeah, exactly. So with all that said, how do you see it going?
I don't know. I think these games they happen a few times where a team needs to rack up a score. So rarely does it happen. I think back to 2015 when Ireland put up a score against Scotland. Wales had to put up a score against Italy and then took the lead, and then Ireland put up a score against Scotland and took the lead.
Yes,
England just fell short of retaking the lead again against France.
My normal rule of thumb when this scenario presents itself is that the team that are chasing the score to win the championship will win the game, but not by the score they're chasing, which is usually how it ends up.
Usually,
I think France might win this by a couple of scores, I reckon, in the end, when the dust settles, about 12 points.
Would you back them? Would you not back them if they're 12 points? I guess is 2 scores shy of where they need to be. It's funny if they're within a score of the goal and they have the ball at the end, they might be
then I'd
good
back
enough
them.
to do it.
But they're not there yet as we shoot this on Tuesday.
It's hard to know. The other question for Scotland, it probably a stupid question, but like if you're 1 point up and you have the ball in the last play, like in a midfield in a decent spot, do you try and go for something, or do you? No, you've won in Paris. You just get the ball off the field.
I think what you should do for all kinds of outside reasons is, yes, you should go for it because the 7-point margin is what they need to get to second, which is much better than fourth. All of those kinds of cerebral reasons. But no, in that scenario, they're obviously kicking it off. They haven't won in Paris since '99. Get it off.
I think that's probably correct.
I
don't know if I see a Scottish win in Paris. I do think that the 6-day turnaround helps Scotland.
Yes, it does.
They only had a game against Italy, which was like a light.
France had 2 very high tempo and high caliber games back to back, and
and high emotional output games. So if they're a little flat going into this game, there is scope for Scotland to disrupt them. There's scope for Scotland to own the kicking game. I kind of see it going like this is like it's one of the ways it could play out, but it's probably what I see as most likely in my head is like Scotland do get on top of them territory wise, but don't really make it count. Like they might get 6-point lead or something like that, and then France do strike maybe twice before half time, have an 8-point lead at half time, and then probably a not good enough third quarter where Scotland maybe edge that and it's still a 1-score game, and maybe France get one more, as you say, to pull away, or maybe not, and they probably edge the contest, but just don't win enough of the game controlling areas to generate enough chances to score. And I think they will be clinical when they get chances, but I just don't see them getting enough to do 21 points. So I think Wales for the championship, but France for the match.
Yeah, our Welsh subs are licking their lips going, geez, I bloody hope so. I'm not as confident about that.
The other way it can play out is that France, like they fixed their bench issue last week, do fix their game management and do get on top of the Scottish pack, maybe get some penalties, maybe Scotland are like, ugh, and they kind of just...
Or do Scotland roll over and have nothing to play for when that happens, you know?
And then all of a sudden, any score is
possible. Again, have Welsh people screaming at them going, no, Scotland, do it for us!
Oh, there'll be some...
It's not a fun place to be. We've been there once or twice with Ireland, relying on Scotland to do something, least of all in Paris for your championship. Oh, it's not ideal. It's not ideal.
Far from it.
But yeah, no, I kind of reckon France get the win, but not the championship. That's where my head is at right now. But I'm willing to be surprised, and I wouldn't be wholly surprised if they did either. It would be disappointing to see a flat performance from Scotland, but it might happen.
It remains to be seen. Italy game notwithstanding, it remains to be seen just the effect that Ireland performance had on them, which is the last proper game they had, and it was really disappointing. So there is that, but maybe they'll come out and deliver a performance and make a ripper of a game of it, which would be fun too.
Here's hoping it'll be a fantastic spectacle. Friday night is when it's going down. Final game of the 2021 Six Nations. France still in it to win it, and we're looking forward to it because it's been a fantastic tournament thus far, and this is a nice way to wrap it off. And given that the circumstances were out of people's control, I think it was a great job by everyone in terms of organising the tournament, and to get through it in the year that we're in with only the one game outstanding as it is, and it's being played the week after. I think it's a great effort.
When we were hearing about things like games in June, and thankfully we don't have any of that to deal with. So all told, just looking forward to what promises to be, I think, a really fun Friday night for neutrals.
Yes.
It's going to be great.
Indeed.
All right, with that we will move on.
Thank you for tuning in to the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed what you hear, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below as well. We enjoy hearing your opinions too. Thank you.